If I asked you to choose between sitting alone with your thoughts for 15 minutes or giving yourself an electric shock, which one would you choose? Take a few minutes to think about it and we'll come back to it at the end. Choice is an interesting thing, and our lives are shaped by the choices we make each day. From what we wear to what we eat to what we need to prioritise from day to day, there always seems to be a choice to make. And it's estimated on average that we make around 35,000 choices each day, which is pretty wild when you think about it. But also, what a privilege it is for us to be able to make those choices. Now let's rewind to 2020, a year I'm sure all of you will remember. The world was about to change, choices were quickly changing, as were habits. And it was during this time that I really thought, it would be more important for me to focus on the things that I could control rather than trying to focus on the things that I couldn't control. Because that's the thing about choices. When we're making these choices, are they conscious or are they unconscious? Are they pushing us forward or are they holding us back? And I thought it's probably this time that I need to think about the choices that are going to push me forward. But with limited choices, what do you do? So I thought, okay, I'm going to take myself out for a daily walk. Daily walk, simple habit, right? You couldn't really do anything at the time. You weren't even allowed to sit on the park bench in the UK, but you could take yourself out for a quick walk. And that word consistency, when we're thinking about the word consistency here, it's me going out for my walk each day would change. It wouldn't be an hour every day. Sometimes it would be 15 minutes. Other times it would be half an hour. But the important thing is that I kept consistent with this choice. I kept consistent with this small habit, because I knew by doing this, I was slowly going to push myself into something that actually was going to benefit my mental well-being, but also my physical well-being. And it was also during this time that I decided to start journaling more regularly, which is this little book right here. I've always loved writing. I feel my feelings very deeply, and I've suffered with anxiety my entire life. And for me, writing is an outlet. It's my way to get my thoughts and feelings down and to look at things from a different perspective. Because when I do that, I can take the emotion out of it and I can think more logically. I've always loved journaling, but it's a habit that I never kept consistent with, because I think a lot of us tend to think in all or nothing type of thinking, black or white thinking. We're on, we're off. We're never quite in the middle. And that's when we struggle to really maintain our habits. So in my head, I thought, right, baseline habit, I'm going to start with the basics. I'm going to start with 3 things that I'm grateful for each day and how I'm feeling. And then if I fancy adding a little bit more, I can then do a journal entry about how I'm feeling, what's been going on in my day, anything that's really getting to me, so that I can look at things from that wider perspective. And it really helped. It really, really helped. Just to be able to sit down and think about things in a different way in a time that was so tough for so many of us really started to change my life. And to think walking and journaling, they don't sound like massive habits when you think about it, but when you're consistent, that is when things start to change. And it was through that writing and writing regularly, I managed to quit drinking. I managed to get myself out of debt. I managed to become self-employed. And all these things were just by writing things down and getting myself out for that daily walk. And I thought, wow, isn't it mad what we can do when we put our mind to it? But then it was also the other thing where it then started to have an impact on other habits in my life. I always wanted to succeed. My career means everything to me, but I never quite knew how to get there. I looked at role models, I looked up to people, and I thought, wow, I would love to do what they're doing. And one of those things was public speaking. Funny that, I've always suffered with anxiety and I'm standing here right now. I never thought I'd see the day. But I was working as a health coach in a behaviour change company, and one of the things they used to offer was monthly webinars. And these monthly webinars were a way to educate our community on different aspects of health, from diet to sleep to stress to exercise to mindset. And I'd always watched the coaches presenting and thought, wow, I would love to do that. But I've never done it. I've never publicly spoken before. I can't do it. And I had this inner battle one day because I was in a meeting, a little old Zoom, and I'm in a meeting and our webinar lead turned around and said, we need someone to help out with the stress webinar. And instantly I was like, oh, this is it, this is your opportunity, do it, put yourself forward. But then inner critic comes up and says, you can't do this. You're going to fail. Why do you think you could put yourself forward for this? You've never done it before. But then my inner cheerleader was going, Jem, this is a perfect opportunity. Do it. Put yourself forward. So I unwillingly unmuted my mic and I said, I'll do it. And actually it was the best feeling. I loved presenting. I did it to an audience. And even though it's different presenting in front of people compared to doing it online, I think just speaking about something and speaking from the heart can actually be really, really tough. And when it was on the topic of stress especially, you think I'm feeling stressed, I'm talking about stress. But at the end of it, I thought, this has actually been great and I've really, really enjoyed this. So the funny thing with this is adding this into my walking, my journaling, and then coming back to doing this webinar, I then ended up becoming the webinar lead a few years later because I consistently kept up with this. I kept presenting, I kept showing up for myself, and then I become the webinar lead who is teaching people to do the thing that I was so terrified to do in the beginning. And it just goes to show that if we take a chance on ourselves, we can really achieve more than what we think we can. Now, going back to that question that I asked you at the beginning about, would you give yourself an electric shock or would you sit with your thoughts for 15 minutes? The reason why I asked you that is because there was a study that was conducted many moons ago now. It was back in 2014, but it was around the time that I was studying for my psychology degree. And what I found really interesting about this is that in this study, they looked at different participants and how they would react to this question. And they found that over 60% of the male participants and 20% of the female participants chose the electric shock. And that just shows how hard it is for people to sit with their thoughts. And it's, we live in a world that's chaotic, it's busy, it's stressful. When do we ever get the opportunity to just sit down and really think? And when do we want to? We're on our devices all the time. We've got our laptops, we've got our phones. We never have the opportunity. And if we do, there's normally a ping of a notification and we get distracted. And then it's back to doing what we're doing. So 15 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but it is. It is. And I think understanding how we think and how we feel, that in itself is difficult. But that's why journaling came in so handy for me. Because with journaling, it really just helped me to sit down and go, do you know what? I'm going to take 5-10 minutes to sit with my thoughts and then see how I feel afterwards. If I want to write about it, I can. If I don't want to write about it, I don't need to. But the most important thing is that I continued to do that. And I think one thing that I want you to take away from this today is that when you get those pockets and you get those moments of being able to sit there to think, do it. Even if it's for 1 minute, just get started. Because when we're thinking about being higher achievers and we're thinking about being leaders and we're wanting to build a life that we feel really proud of, you need to take time to self-reflect. How can you know where you want to be in life if you don't take time to understand who you are? Our values change over time, our identity changes, but by pairing this together and really understanding who we are as people and what we want out of our lives, we give ourselves a better chance. And that's why I bring it back to those three things: choice, consistency, and self-reflection. Because when we pair these things together, that's when the real change starts to happen. And I like to call it my back to basics framework, because, we're always told, buy this supplement, buy this, spend hundreds of pounds on that. You don't need to. Focus on your core habits, focus on the things that are really, really, really easy. Taking myself out for a daily walk, that was simple, but now 5 years later, I've kept up the habit. I always make a joke to my friends and say, if you have a pet and you have a dog, you take yourself out for a walk, or you take your dog out for a walk. For me, I'm like, you are the pet, you are the dog, take yourself out for the walk. Because I know that I'll be able to focus better, I'll be able to show up for myself better, but show up for friends and family and at work. I will be more joy to be around, but also it will reduce those feelings of anxiety. It will help me to feel happier, and it will allow me to build a life. And the same as you watching this now, it will help you to build a life that you feel fulfilled with. Because you might be living the life that you feel fulfilled with now, which is great. But if you're not, how are you going to get there? And that's why take it back to basics. Make small choices, tiny habits. Keep consistent, but be flexible. Like I said, you don't need to be on or off. Find the middle ground. Find what works with you. Because each habit will be slightly different in the way that you show up for it. Sometimes your sleep can be great. Sometimes your stress can be terrible. but your environment will change your habits, and different things in your life over the lifespan will change how your habits show up for you and how you show up for them. So keep consistent but flexible, and keep reflecting. Take time out for yourself and just really understand what's going on in your mind, because that is where the key to success really, really is. And there is a quote that I heard a while ago, and it was that, we all make choices, but in the end our choices make us. And that is something that really sticks with me, because how many times do we make choices that are pushing us forward instead of holding us back? Thank you.